All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us today. We're here to talk about animation or automation, and really this idea of unlocking yes. That's what I wanted to really anchor this to, is this idea of how do we do more? How do we actually help you do more with Acton by connecting it to different systems? And the genesis of this is that I think often when we think about Acton and we think about kind of your context, we think about it as kind of this, just it's a two-way street. Context come into Acton, and context and data about them goes out. Um, and that's it. I mean, that's kind of the primary integration structure that we often see customers implement and that we often end up talking about. But really, there's a lot more out there. So if we think about those two boxes, Acton and then your context source, and that could be a CRM like a Salesforce or a Microsoft Dynamics, that could be a list. We have people who connect with from all sorts of different systems. And so whatever that is, there's so much more that surrounds that. And the question I want us to really think about is a little bit, well, what if you could connect to that? What if that was accessible to you in Acton? What would that change? And specifically, how might your marketing improve if you were able to access data that you didn't have right now? Maybe that data is coming from, like I said, a different system. What if you knew about contact activity and you knew about it in something approximating real time? Or what if you could actually push information out to others, because that would be really helpful to them? And I think when we often get into this, it becomes very just confusing. There's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of discussion, but it's not really clear what we're talking about. So you might have heard people talk about webhooks. This is a really cool technology, but if you don't know what what it means and how you would actually make use of it, it's a lot of times just kind of thrown away. You could use a webhook, but what does that actually mean? Or API. And I took this from Zapier. We'll be talking a little bit about their product here in a bit. We got an open API framework, or we could connect through the API to that. That's a nice idea, but again, if you don't know how to actually make use of that, it's just kind of empty words and doesn't necessarily move you forward in terms of being able to get to that improved marketing. And one of the things that I've noticed in conversations is that often we think about this as very linear, like it's point A to point B. And when we're having the discussion about data movement, if it can go from point A to point B, if we can use a standard integration to go from your CRM to Acton, or we can push something directly from Acton to another system, we're fine. But that as soon as it isn't point A to point B, it starts to break down a little bit. And my example that we'll be working through today is point A is maybe an SMS system that actually tells us we sent this or we received a message, and it says what phone number it was used. And of course, Acton, actually, all of its things really require an email. That's how Acton orients around a contact. And so I've got this conflict, and I stole this, I think, from Lego Mindstorm, something my son worked with, where different data types have different shapes. And so you've got this square shape coming in from one side, and you got this triangle thing that needs to be input into. And so we get to this point, we kind of go, oh, I guess it doesn't work. And often I just see it, people kind of throw their hands up and go, that'd be nice, but it doesn't do it. And so my encouragement today is don't give up. We're going to make it. We're going to be able to figure this thing out. We want to help you through this conversation, kind of open up some ideas and get you to yes. That's the title of the presentation. We want to be able to say yes to things like, how can I actually connect these two systems? And the piece that I would say is that often what we have to do is we've got to turn this into a series of steps. It's not necessarily a linear path from point A to point B. We may have to take a couple of steps to get there, but we can get there. And so kind of pulling this back just a little bit, my goal today, very clearly, is not to make you an expert in pretty much anything. Certainly, though, we're not going to get into the expert levels or even maybe even proficient levels around webhooks and data integrations. That's not going to happen. And if you came today thinking that you were going to walk out as an expert, I apologize for the misunderstanding on that one. It's not going to happen. My goal today is, however, to demystify what we're doing. And I hope to really inspire you to think maybe differently about what is possible. And if you could take a couple of those steps, what you might be able to achieve and how that might be able to change your use of Acton and your ability to do that marketing. So let me start by taking you on a little personal journey that I've gone through. And if you didn't see my title, I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Acton, and that in no way qualifies me to do software development. I am not an engineer. I'm okay at technology, but I don't think of myself as especially technical. And so when I heard people talk about APIs and webhooks and this other stuff, for me, I thought that was for other people. I thought that was for those secret people who knew the things that they needed to know, who had gone to the special class or had the handshake or whatever it was that they figured out, that they knew how to do that. But at the same time, what I was experiencing was I kind of got tired of being told that the data I needed wasn't available or it was really complicated and not really being able to think through it because I had the sense that it needed to be possible. Like we've got pretty cool computers and all this other technology that's out there. And you're telling me you can't figure out how to connect point A to point B? Are you sure? And so I started kind of exploring this a lot more and really coming back to this diagram, started to try and answer the question, okay, well, if I have a phone number and I need to get to an email, what does that look like? And the answer is generally we have to put something in there that kind of, interprets the two things, that takes us from a phone number and gets us to an email. And so the question we have to ask is, well, what system, and there might be multiple, what system has both the email and the contact number, right? And if I know that there's a system like that, then I can say, okay, well, if I got this phone number from over here in system A, well, can I go figure out what email that's connected to? Then I take the next step. Cool. Well, now I just got to do some reformatting, and then I can finish off and here's the email address and pass that back. And now I can talk to point B. And that concept, what we're talking about, that kind of that idea of like a data flow is fundamentally what we're here to kind of get through. And we are going to talk about that in the context of Zapier. We work with Zapier. I think it's a really good product. I think they do a lot of things really well. One of the things they do well is they actually make this relatively easy to implement. They actually are very, in my opinion, very easy to use. But at the same time, this is not a marketing thing for Zapier. We're not here to say that you must use Zapier. If you go to G2 and you look at Zapier, this is the collection of tools that are presumably available to you. There are a lot of options out there. And so the most important piece to take away in terms of like what you do is to pick the right tool. Whatever that is for you and your company, that's the most important part. We have customers who have other products that do similar things, and they use those. We have customers, I was speaking to one in Europe a couple of weeks ago, and Zapier is not really an option because servers, I think, are in the US and they didn't want to be doing data transfer into a US server. So they use a product that has some European options and allows them to be more compliant with GDPR. So we are going to talk about Zapier and how to use that to kind of make this connection. But ultimately, just know that we are very open to kind of like, it doesn't matter what technology you use, the concept is the same regardless. And then let's talk a little bit about a webhook, because that's one of the pieces, that's one of the foundational pieces that we're going to talk about. And I hope to, again, not talk about the technology behind it, but sort of what it's doing. And the way I think about it is that a webhook is really, it's a notification scheme. It lets you know that something happened, or lets you tell another system that something happened. And so think about the first element of this is this idea of notification or alert. And it's got some other benefits. One is that it's actually really simple. Webhooks tend to be very simple. They have what I would say is probably static authentication. And really what that means is you don't have to kind of pass a username and credential and kind of update things every time you use it like you might with an API. You can actually kind of lock that down, and that allows it to just kind of sit and stay, which makes the setup much, much easier. And then the third thing is actually a little bit of a limitation. In many of the webhooks that I've had exposure to, the data is a little limited. And that's certainly the example of this, certainly the case in the example we're going to talk about today, this idea of the phone number. You get the phone number and that's it. And there's not something where I go back and say, well, could you also send me the email? No, I mean, I'm going to tell you that the message went out and I'll tell you what phone number it went to, but that's what you get. And so when I'm stuck with that limited data, that's actually where we get to our breakdown. But that's the trade-off. That's sort of what we have to work around. We're going to be told in relatively real time that this thing happened. It's pretty easy to set it up, but I only get the data that I get. So as we then transfer that back, as we come back to this idea of point A to point B, how are we going to make this thing work? Well, over in point A, that's the SMS tool. So that's the thing that's going to send the email or receive send the message or receive the message. And then I'm going to suggest that for today's purposes, we're going to talk about how we would use Zapier to do that conversion, to take the phone number and get the email and then be able to pass it forward. And then point B, we're going to think about pushing this to a custom event in Hackathon. And again, we're actually not going to get all the way to that today for this purpose. We'll save some of that, but this is the scenario we're going to work our way through. All right, so let's dig in just a little bit more. Here's our point A, point B. The first thing we actually are going to need is something to listen. We have to set up what it is, this object, this concept in Zapier. It's a listening URL. It's basically just saying, yeah, is anything happening? And that's where we start. Once we have that, we go back to our SMS tool. And now we're going to actually tell the SMS tool what your listening URL is, right? So we have to set it up to listen so that we can go over and tell the SMS thing what to, where to send its message. When it does that, it's going to send the message over to the listening URL, which initiates the whole process. We're then going to go get the right email address. Now, in this example, we're actually going to go back to the SMS tool because it has both the email and the phone number. So it's got its own listening URL. And then we're going to bring that back, and then we'll go do the next thing. So that's the scenario we're going to work our way through. These next slides we're going to dig into Zapier. I'm doing this on slides, so I didn't have to try and do it live. But you'll see what it is. Again, don't worry so much about the mechanics. I would really encourage you not to worry about what I'm typing or exactly where the click is. What we want to be thinking about is the concept, and specifically, are we getting the idea of sort of how data and how we move from step to step? Yeah, fair. So try not to get too worried if you don't understand everything of what's going on in terms of the specifics, because this is really about the idea of what we're doing. All right, so this is Zapier. The first thing we're going to use is we're actually going to use this application called Webhooks by Zapier. Really original title, but what it lets us do is actually set up that listening URL. And specifically what we're going to do as we work our way through this is we are going to, as you can see over here on the right-hand side, we're going to set up a new event. It's going to be this thing called a catch hook, which is basically the idea I would have called it probably a listening hook. It's going to sit there and be like, listening. Once we do that, there's my URL. You can see it right there. It's under the your webhook URL. That's it. That was as easy as it was. I kind of clicked a couple buttons. It gave me a URL. That URL is specific to this particular function. And now I can take that, and I'm going to go back over to our SMS tool. In this case, we're looking at a product here called Simple Texting. Somebody we've done some integrations with. Nice, simple way to send messages. Very effective product. And they have the ability to set up a webhook on their side. And I've had some other ones set up already, so I didn't remove them. But in this case, I'm going to click on New Subscription, and this box pops up. So I put my URL from Zapier into the Simple Texting box. And think of this. This is now telling Simple Texting, that's what I want you to, that's what's listening. That URL is listening for your signal. Well, what signal? In this case, I've selected incoming and outgoing messages, all phone numbers, and all messages. So I did a couple things. I didn't actually change anything other than pick that trigger. I'm going to click on Save Changes. And now at the bottom, I have this new kind of listener. And there it is at the bottom. That's the URL from Zapier. That's it. I have now completed steps 1 and 2 in my diagram. So we did the listening URL. We went back to the SMS tool, and we let, we asked it to let that URL know. And now it'll start to do that. The next step is for us to go ahead and get the right email address. And the way we're going to do that, remember, is we're going to go back and we're going to call into the SMS tool, and we're going to ask for the email address. Okay, let's take a look at that part. And then of course, once we have that, we can actually take the next step and do the next thing. So let's go back. Let's take a look. When we call that URL, when the first message comes through, what Zapier is going to do, you can see it says we're listening. They're waiting for that first message. And when that happens, this is what comes through. And you can see there under request A, you can see all the data. The key spot on this is that it actually says there under values contact phone, there's the phone number. That's a fake phone number in case you want to call it later. I don't know who it is, 89874321. That phone number is the key that I'm looking for. And you can see it's got a very convenient title there called values contact phone. I assume that's the contact phone value, kind of like that's how they're sending that over. We don't control that. That's just what they're sending. That goes back to that kind of that limitation. I'm only getting this data, and I can't do anything more than what I have with this data, directly. But I can go and ask the next question. And so as I come back here, I've got the phone number, and now I've got to go get the email address so that I can do that. The way I'm going to do that is, as we look at this, I'm going to take that phone number, and I'm going to set up another webhook. So I'm going to click on that next box, and I clicked on Webhooks by Zapier. I'll click on the newer version, and there it is again. Now I have to actually kind of figure out, what am I going to call? This is probably the most complicated part. And again, the question you're asking yourself is it reasonable for me to be able to go and kind of use with a phone number? Can I go get the rest of that contact data? And my answer to most of these points is absolutely. We live in 2020, it's 2024. This is very standard technology. And so I should be able to go and ask the system, well, give me the rest of the data. Give me more information about that. And so the way I found that out was I went to the Simple Texting website, specifically their API docs, so I found it. It's up there on the right. It's not terribly intuitive. And again, this is the part where I'd hope you don't tune out. Don't kind of go, man, that's beyond me, or I don't know what that page is, so I'm not going to kind of listen. What you're looking for is, does this thing reply? And essentially, you can see under the top part, get a contact. Get a contact via their unique ID or phone number, right? That's what we want. We want the contact information based on the phone number. And so that URL tells us what to do. And when we come to the back to the Zapier page, we basically put that phone number into the, that URL into the system. It's a get call, and there's the URL. I just copied it over there. Now, the problem is I have to send what phone number? This is where Zapier actually starts to shine. This is what it does really well. When I click in there, I get this option, and it's going to let me pick the variables, the things that came through from the first thing. So if we went back and we looked at all those places where it said phone number and the different things that came through, the one I want is phone number. So I can just click on it, and I pick that, values, account, phone number. Excuse me. I think I had to scroll down when I did that. This is the problem with not doing it live. I scroll down a little bit, and there's the phone number. Values, contact phone, 503-897-4321, with the one apparently cut off. So as we look through this, now we're picking that value, and when I click it, it's just going to show up here in this section up here underneath the URL. So now my URL is that URL from Simple Texting /API/context. That was just standard. And then it's going to put the phone number in based on what actually is being supplied by that initial call. And that's it. We do a quick thing down here called authorization. We paste in basically the unique piece. That's what's going to let us do it. That's the security, so that other people can't make that call. You have to know the secret key. You type that in, paste it in, whichever way it works, and you're done. When we make the call and we test it, you're going to see it's going to come back with, here's the number. So there's the phone number. The contact phone is listed. I think it's my mouse. So there's the contact phone number we asked for. And it comes back with the name that I found an AI name generator the other day, and it came back with Jennifer McLean. So there's her fake phone number. There's her fake phone number, and there's her fake email address. And so that's it. We made 2 steps. I promise you, I did not cut anything out. I heard that the Taylor Swift video, someone said that they'd edited the concert video to show how fast, so that her costume changes really seemed fast. And the next person said, no, they were really that fast in real life. Like that's what it was. And honestly, what I just went through is every step I went through. I didn't skip anything. There's nothing being eliminated. I'd be happy to show it to you live. So in this case, what we've done though is we've gone back and we've taken our SMS. We've used Zapier to go back and get that phone number, take the phone number and get the email address. And then the next step would be to finish off point B and actually use that email address to post our custom touch point over to Acton, or put the data into Acton, or do whatever the next step, do the next right thing. And so as we look through this, we would now be going back and setting up the listing URL in Acton, and then telling Zapier what that URL is, so that we can build through this. And actually, excuse me, I should have gotten rid of the build on that one. Now we're going to come through. We're actually going to push that URL through into the listing URL. And that's it. Oh, I think my problem is I was going backwards on my slides. There we go. I'll get it this time. Excuse me. Sorry about that. This is with proof that I'm definitely not a professional presenter. So we've done all the work. We did we got the URL, we did the list, and we went back here. And now that we know this, we just have to tell Acton what the next step is. And so what I want to do at this point is actually encourage you, if you are interested in that next step, show up at our workshop next week. It'll be a little more interactive. We'll have a chance to kind of actually connect and do this live, and we'll show you the Acton parts of it. It's Tuesday, March 26th, 9 a.m. Pacific. We will send out, as part of the follow-up to this, we'll send out the link to sign up for that. We have office hours every week. You're always welcome to join, but this particular one, we're going to be focusing on this topic and really kind of finishing off this work. But again, my goal today was not to build it with you, but really to demystify some of what's going on here, and hopefully to inspire you to think about what's possible without too much extra work. By taking a few steps, by doing a little bit of the work, that we can actually do a lot more with your product, with your data, and with Acton than you're currently perhaps considering. And that point A to point B would be lovely, but often we need to actually take a couple of steps. It's not necessarily clear that we can go directly from point A to point B. And so when we hit those barriers in terms of the straight shot, really just, again, don't give up. Remember that there is a lot more out there. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of opportunity. And so what if you could connect to that? What would that mean for you? What would that mean for your marketing? And what more could we do? So I'm at 20 minutes. That's about where I wanted to be. thank you for the time today. If there are questions, I haven't seen anything in the Q&A come through. I've got a couple of pieces that came in earlier, so I can go through those. But if there's anything that you do have questions on in the Q&A, please go ahead and put that in there. Otherwise, they will also be sending out the video and doing follow-up in terms of the office hours. So before you drop off, just know that you'll be getting that. Like I said, go ahead and put those questions in. There was one from earlier, and the question was, how long did it take to learn some of what was going on there? My personal learning style is very experiential. I like to just kind of, I've got a problem, and so I just start kind of trying stuff. The first time through took a little bit longer. It probably took an hour to get that thing set up the first time. Last night, as I was finishing up some of these pieces, and over the course of this last week, as I've been building out the slides, I'm estimating that really this one probably took less than 20 minutes to actually go from start to finish. So the first time was a little bit longer. The second time was a little bit faster. I suspect the third time might be even faster. But know that I think it's very easy to access. There's great tutorials for all of these products. And again, Zapier is one of many products that fits into this space. And I think you would find many of them to be relatively straightforward and easy. And these are really designed, that's one of the other pieces, these are designed to be non-technical in some way. I mean, they're not technical in the sense that it's not like painting or something like that. But you don't really need to be an engineer or someone with a CS background to be able to access this. And I think that's one of the parts that's exciting for me as someone who's not from that side of the fence, to be able to actually step into that and sort of open up opportunity for us to be able to do more. That always excites me. I really like that. So that's one of the things that I've done. And then, and I guess there was a question about limitations and sort of accessing things in different areas. There are places where what I showed is about as easy as it gets, and there's certainly more complexity. We can handle that. What I would probably say is, again, let's get on some calls, call your CSM or support team member, or somebody who can get us in touch, either myself or somebody else on the Act-On team. Let's just talk through it. There might be a couple extra steps, but most of the time what I see is that once we kind of understand the initial kind of way that we connect to the data, most of these products have these APIs, these webhooks available. So it's really just a matter of understanding what that other product has. We obviously, our team knows the Act-On side really well. And so what we're just trying to figure out is like, what's the mapping? How do we work from point A to point B? And what steps do we need to take? There might be a couple extra that we need to do, some that are more complicated than what I showed today. I could probably stop sharing that slide with as lovely as the little heart person is. That might be a little more complicated than what we showed today. But I think that for the most part, what we're finding is that a lot of these problems are really solvable, and that people are able to open up opportunity. And then an Act-On example. Yeah, so an Act-On example of what we're doing, a little bit more kind of maybe from the Act-On perspective is I think where that's trying to get to. One of the ones that we've had a conversation with is doing sort of a form post or posting, or when a form is submitted, to take that and actually take some action on it, put it into a system that we don't have a direct integration to. And one of the challenges is that the webhook that Act-On publishes, kind of like the one we looked at for the SMS, the webhook that Act-On publishes has fairly limited data available to it. So it basically says, we got an email, you had a form submit, but it doesn't give you the data for the form submit. And so if you want to take that forms data and put it somewhere, you have to kind of take a second step. And so if you think about this as point A to point B, webhook will lead to form submission in this other tool. It's not going to work because you're only going to get you might get I think it sends the email address and maybe a couple data points, but you're certainly not going to get the 5 custom fields that were in that form, which is really maybe what your sales team or somebody else needs to be able to take action on it. And so the solution on this one would be to use a webhook that says to Zapier, or again, what other tool you're using, hey, form submit happened. We call back into Act-On using one of the APIs, and we get that full set of data, change it into what the format we need, and then push that out to the third-party tool, this other tool that's doesn't have the native integration. And so with that, we're essentially either replicate, you can think about it as replicate, but we might be augmenting the post-form submission actions that are already in the native integrations, or making those available now into a different system, or potentially even the same system, but using some other kind of logic or putting it into a different place. We're doing something that we can't do with the native integration. And so that's kind of maybe a good example, a recent example of something where people are doing this from the Act-On side as opposed to bringing data in like the example I did. Okay, I think that it feels like we're about out of the questions there. They slowed down. If there's anything else, please reach out.